The Caribbean Sea was a churning beast, its surface a maelstrom of grey and white foam, under a sky the colour of a fresh bruise. Captain Elias Thorne gripped the helm of his ship, the Sea Serpent, the polished wood slick with rain and spray. His face, chiselled by sun and hardship, was a mask of concentration. The storm wasn't just a squall, it was a furious, living thing, and it was threatening to tear his vessel apart. "Mainmast, Captain!" First Mate Finn bellowed over the wind's shriek. "She's groaning like a dying man." "Brace the lines! Secure everything!" Elias commanded, his voice a gravelly roar that seemed to carry an authority even the tempest respected. For 5 years he had plied these treacherous waters, his reputation as a formidable but just pirate, spreading from Port Royal to Havana. He took what was necessary, but never indulged in cruelty. It was a code that kept his crew loyal and his conscience clear. Suddenly, a flicker of light pierced the gloom. A Spanish galleon, twice the size of the Sea Serpent, was lurching dangerously on the waves, its sails torn to shreds. It was a lumbering target, and Elias's crew, despite their fatigue, felt the familiar thrill of the hunt. "Captain, should we move in?" Another pirate, a young man named Jack, shouted, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Elias hesitated. The galleon was a wreck, clearly sinking. Attacking it now felt less like a raid and more like a scavenging on the dead. His gaze swept the galleon's deck. He saw figures struggling, the glint of steel, and then a brutal shove. A dark, hooded figure, bound in heavy chains, was hurled from the deck and into the boiling waves. The splash was swallowed by the roar of the ocean. A cold certainty settled in Elias's gut. The Spanish had not thrown cargo into the sea. They had executed a prisoner. It was a common act, but the sight of it, the cold, calculated cruelty of it, struck a chord in his hardened heart. A memory, fleeting and painful, surfaced, a flash of a little girl's face, a storm of years past, and a promise he could never keep. "No," he said, the word cutting through the wind. "We're not attacking. We're getting that person out of the water." His crew stared at him, bewildered. "Captain?" Finn asked, his brow furrowed with confusion. "They're a prisoner. We've got no time to play saviour." "I said we're getting them out." "Drop the longboat," Elias ordered, his voice brooking no argument. He was already shrugging off his heavy coat, his resolve hardening with every passing second. He knew it was madness, but something deeper than logic was driving him. A powerful, unseen force that he hadn't felt in years. He moved with a pirate's precision, securing a line around his waist. "Finn, when I'm ready, pull us back up." With that, he plunged into the freezing, turbulent water. The ocean immediately tried to swallow him whole, the current a fierce, unforgiving grip. He fought his way through the churning chaos, the Spanish galleon slowly slipping beneath the waves behind him. He spotted the figure, a small, still form in the endless grey, a heavy chain pulling them down. He swam with everything he had, the salt water stinging his eyes. He reached the figure, gripping them under the arms, and gave the signal. The crew worked together, their grunts of effort a new rhythm against the storm. They hauled the heavy, unconscious form onto the deck. Elias followed, shivering and exhausted. The figure was wrapped in a rough canvas cloak, the hood pulled so far forward that only a small, pale chin was visible. The heavy iron chains were still fastened around their wrists and ankles. Elias knelt beside the person, his chest heaving. The Sea Serpent had taken a beating, but she was still afloat. His crew was safe, and for a reason he couldn't explain, so was this stranger. He looked at Finn, who just shook his head slowly, a mix of concern and admiration in his eyes. "Get them below decks," Elias said, his voice raw. "Finn, get the doctor, and tell the cook to make something hot." He watched as his crew lifted the figure, carrying them carefully away from the rain and the wind. The storm still raged, but for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the tempest in Elias's own heart had begun to quiet. The next morning the sun rose over a peaceful sea, its rays glittering on the wet deck of the Sea Serpent. The storm had passed, leaving a silent, ethereal calm in its wake. The crew, exhausted but relieved, were repairing the damage. Elias, however, could not rest. His thoughts kept returning to the hooded prisoner. He found himself standing outside the small infirmary, the wood door rough under his fingers. He pushed it open and stepped inside, the dim light revealing the figure lying on a narrow cot. The chains had been removed, the heavy shackles left on the floor like discarded memories. The person was no longer hooded, but their face was turned away, hidden by a curtain of long, dark hair. The ship's doctor, a grizzled old man named Alistair, looked up. "Fever's gone down, Captain, but they're weak. Been through a lot." Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on the figure. He approached the cot slowly, his heavy boots silent on the wooden floor. He sat on a small stool, waiting. After a moment, the figure stirred. A hand, small and pale, pushed the hair away from their face. It was a young woman, her skin fair, her features delicate but worn with hardship. Her eyes, when they finally opened, were a deep, startling blue, full of a cautious fear. "You're safe now," Elias said softly, his voice a low rumble. "We're pirates, but we don't harm the helpless." The woman's eyes widened slightly, her gaze searching his face. She pushed herself up on one elbow, her movements slow and pained. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He fetched a cup of water from a small table and held it out to her. She took it with a shaky hand and drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice a soft rasp. It was an elegant voice, a voice that belonged not to a prisoner, but to someone of means, of education. Elias felt a jolt. There was something in her eyes, a fleeting familiarity he couldn't place, a feeling of dread and hope warring in his chest. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice now tight with a rising emotion. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Her hand went to her neck, pulling a thin silver chain from beneath her tattered clothes. A small, tarnished locket hung from it. She unlatched it, revealing a broken half of a carved seahorse. Elias's own hand went to his chest, where a matching locket, the other half of the seahorse, was always tucked beneath his shirt. His heart hammered against his ribs. It couldn't be. Not after all these years, not after a life lived under the belief that he had lost everyone. "Elias," she whispered, the name a ghost of a sound. "It's me, Isla." The world seemed to spin on its axis. His hands began to tremble. "Isla," he breathed, the name a prayer. His little sister, stolen from their family home during a raid when they were children. He had been so young, so helpless. He had vowed to find her, a vow that had eventually faded into the background of a life of piracy, a life he built to survive a world that had taken everything from him. Tears welled in his eyes, a sight that would have shocked his crew to their core. He reached out a hand, and she met it, her touch as warm and real as a memory. "I looked for you," he said, his voice cracking. "For years I looked. They told me you were gone, that they had sold you." "They did," she said, her voice now stronger, though thick with emotion. "I was a servant, a slave. I ended up with a Spanish naval captain. I escaped. I was on a ship trying to get to Port Royal. He found me. He was going to sell me to a cruel master, to be a wife. I fought him. He was a monster, Elias." He wrapped his arms around her, a fierce, protective embrace that was more than just a hug. It was a homecoming. He held her and sobbed, the hardened shell he had built around his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. The crew outside heard the commotion and came in, their faces full of concern. They saw their stoic, unyielding captain holding a strange woman and weeping. Finn's face was a study in shock, but then he saw the silver locket and understood. The rough, rugged pirates who had sailed with Elias for years suddenly saw a different side of their captain, a man who had been broken and was now, slowly, being put back together. "She's my sister," Elias said, looking up at his crew, his face wet with tears. "She's my family." The crew's faces softened. They had their code, but family was something they all understood. From that moment on, they were no longer just pirates. They were protectors. And anyone who dared to threaten their captain's sister would face the full wrath of the Sea Serpent. Isla's presence aboard the Sea Serpent changed everything. The crew, a collection of rogues and cast-offs, treated her with a protective reverence. She was not a damsel in distress, but a resilient survivor who had endured years of hardship. She and Elias spent hours together on deck, filling in the gaps of the childhood they had lost. But their newfound peace was shattered 2 days later when a lookout spotted a ship on the horizon with a black eagle emblazoned on its mainmast. It was the Vulture, captained by Salazar, the ruthless Spaniard who had held Isla captive. "He's coming for me," Isla said, her resolve firm. Elias's blood ran cold. He ordered his crew to prepare for battle. The air was thick with tension. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they would not back down. "We're not fighting for treasure this time," Elias told his crew, his voice a low command. "We're fighting for family. We will not lose." The Vulture closed the distance, its cannons ready. Elias's ship answered with a volley from its smaller guns. The battle was a deafening cacophony of cannon fire and splintering wood. The Sea Serpent was outmatched, but Elias had a plan. "Isla, get below deck," he commanded, but she shook her head. "No, I can help." "He kept all his maps in the captain's quarters. I know his routes. I can help you find a way out of here." With her guidance, Elias maneuvered his ship toward a dangerous shallow reef that Salazar would never dare to navigate. The Vulture followed, its massive bulk a testament to Salazar's arrogance. "He's not slowing down! He'll hit the reef!" Isla cried out. "Let him!" Elias growled. "He'll be too proud to be afraid." He was right. The Vulture slammed into the reef with a sickening crunch. The battle turned hand to hand as Salazar's men boarded the Sea Serpent. Elias fought with the ferocity of a cornered lion, his cutlass a blur of steel as he fought his way to Salazar. The two captains met, steel clashing. Salazar was brutal, but Elias was swift and fueled by rage. The fight was quick and decisive. With a final thrust, Elias disarmed his opponent, the tip of his cutlass at Salazar's throat. "She's just a woman," Salazar spat. "She's my sister," Elias said, his voice cold and hard, "and you will never touch her again." With a quick, merciful strike, the fight was over. The remaining Spanish sailors surrendered. In the aftermath, Isla threw her arms around him. "We did it," she whispered. "We're free." Elias held her close, surveying the damage to his ship. He had his sister back, and his life as a pirate felt empty now. He looked out at the vast, endless sea. The horizon was a promise of a new life. He no longer wanted to raid and plunder. "Finn," he said, turning to his first mate, "set a new course towards Tortuga. We'll sell the goods and start a new life, an honest one." Finn smiled, a wide, genuine grin. "Aye, Captain, a new course, for family." As the Sea Serpent sailed away, a new journey began. A pirate captain and his long-lost sister, together at last, sailing towards a hopeful future built on the unbreakable bond of family. If you loved this story and want to see more thrilling tales of adventure, romance, and the unbreakable bonds of family, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next epic tale.